Hi, I am Tara Rittler. I'm in social media with editor with TulsaKids magazine, and I'm being joined by Becca with OSUs Body Image and Disordered Eating Laboratory, and we are having a couple technical difficulties, so just give me a second and we will begin the interview. Thank you. Here we go. All right. Social media editor with TulsaKids magazine, and I'm being joined by Becca with OSUs Body Image and Disordered. Just making sure everything's shared to our TulsaKids magazine page. You can watch it there. We're really excited about the discussion today. And at any time, if you want to leave comments in the comment box, feel free to do that. Okay. All right. I think we're ready to begin. Hi, Becca. Would you like to start by telling us a little bit about OSU's, the laboratory that you're a part of?
Yeah, so it's the Body Image and Disordered Eating Lab, and we do a lot of different things in the lab. We do research, we do activism, and it's mostly centered on body image, weight stigma, groups who are most affected by those types of things. And we do, outreach in the community and things like that.
Fantastic. All right. Well, I'm going to jump into our interview. The first question is, can you talk a little bit about how the coronavirus pandemic has impacted people in terms of body image and how we see ourselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So the pandemic has had a huge impact on how we see ourselves. In general, stress leads to higher cortisol levels, which is a hormone in the body, which can lead to, like different kinds of hunger issues, weight gain. It can really put a wrench in everything. And on top of that, this situation is unique in itself in that people's schedules are completely turned around. People's routines are changed. People don't have access to the gym anymore. People don't have access to food sometimes that they used to have because so many things have changed. People are having to cook more. People have kids at home. People also have a lot of time on their hands to think about their body, think about what they look like. And the only way to connect with people is through social media. And through social media, you're directly comparing yourself to other people. In Zoom interviews, you're comparing yourself to people. You have to see yourself as you're doing business meetings. And sometimes the lighting isn't flattering. Sometimes it's hard. And it can be really difficult.
Mm-hmm. That is so true. Experience all of that. So thank you. Okay, so can you talk to me a little bit about eating habits? Can disasters and stressful situations like our current quarantine affect a child's eating habits in particular? Like if you've noticed your child is not quite eating like they normally do.
Yeah, I think that especially in regards to kids, there's a huge routine change, and routine change can really, really bring about a lot of anxiety and stress in kids. And sometimes kids don't really know how to voice things like I'm anxious. They don't have that kind of language to talk about their emotions. And so symptoms like eating behavior, sleeping behaviors really shed a light on what's going on for them. And so it could be overeating, it could be undereating. People respond to stress in different ways. And so kids aren't at school, kids aren't seeing their friends. There could be a huge change in their eating habits.
Yeah, and if you notice that, like what are some responses a parent might take?
Yeah, I think noticing it, having conversations about it, I think exploring, not necessarily like, well, why aren't you eating, but having those deeper conversations about like, well, how's this pandemic been for you? You say that you're not hungry, what's going on for you? Trying to get to those deeper issues about, maybe they're lonely, maybe they miss their friends, maybe they're like stressed with school, maybe they're really scared and they don't know that. So maybe I think having those conversations to talk about mental health first and then kind of going into eating. And I don't think anybody can be perfect in this moment. I think, having rigid meal schedules is maybe more like a higher goal. I think just making sure that you're doing your best. Kids are, having those open conversations and just like trying to make things feel more normal.
Not fighting about it.
Yeah. Especially as parents, I don't think it's doesn't help to be hard on yourself in these moments either.
Yes, thank you. Okay. Yeah. So the next question is, parents have been responsible for feeding their children 24/7, and many are not used to that. We're used to them having school lunches and some of that taken care of. One of our readers asked, since I've started working from home, I've noticed myself skipping meals. What are some consequences of this that I might want to be aware of? And do you have any advice for trying to stick to a stricter meal schedule? Is it important to try to eat meals around the same time each day?
So going to the first question, what the consequences of not eating are, you're not getting nutrition in your body, you're not getting fuel for the day. And if you are not being outside, you're not being as active, that's kind of your like one energy source. And so if you're not eating, it can kind of be this downward spiral. I would really, again, look at why meals are being skipped. Is it anxiety? Is it depression? Is it lack of sleep? Is it oversleep? Kind of looking at, what's underneath this like symptom of not wanting to eat. And I think it's important to eat every day because we need sustenance, we need to survive. But I think that coming into it with a strict idea might be more anxiety ridden, like, oh, I have to hit my 3 meals a day and I have to hit my 2 snacks. I think at least being like, I just, having the mindset where like, I deserve food, I deserve fuel, and I'm going to go into this, making sure that my body is sustaining itself rather than trying to be perfect. Yeah, and obviously adding, if you feel like you can take on that schedule and that routine, we do so. But I think that not being hard on ourselves is really important because that can lead to more anxiety and more shame and guilt about the body.
That makes sense. I know in my case, like if I skip a meal, I think it's usually because I've just worked through lunch and I don't feel like I can just stop. So it's probably important to also just take a break.
Yeah, you point out a good note in that when we're home, it's really hard to have boundaries in your day. So you're like in work mode and it's hard to get in lunch mode or self-care mode because you're kind of always accessible to your email or like meetings and things like that.
True. So yeah, good point. All right. So along these lines, how much are kids influenced by their parents' eating habits and mindsets around food? How should we talk about food in our bodies and kind of our
Yeah, this is a good question. And unfortunately, the way that parents and guardians talk about their bodies and food has a huge impact on children and adolescents, which can be kind of scary. And nobody expects anybody to be perfect. We live in a world that is very difficult on body image, regardless of what you look like. And so that already exists in the world. And so in the home, I think it's important to model self-acceptance and body acceptance. I know for me personally, when I was younger, I can't remember my mom being strict on my body, but I can remember every diet she went on. I can remember all the comments she made about her body. And as young children, we really internalize those messages and bring them on ourselves. And so healthy ways to kind of combat that is focusing on what our bodies do. So food gives us nutrition, exercise gives us strength, and like how often it's more focusing on not necessarily what the body looks like, but what the body can do for us. Like it can run, it can jump, it can do all these fun things.
It's positive. Yeah. So we just say things without even thinking of it because we've internalized messages too. So you don't always realize what messages you're sending the kids. But yeah, so thank you. I'm just checking the chat comments. Okay. So yes. With kids. More time we're spending with our kids. Yeah, sorry, you froze a little bit too. Okay, I'm going to repeat that.
Repeat that last question. Yeah.
Yes, I will repeat that, and now we're back. Okay, so I think this is just kind of building on the previous question. Just with kids around us all the time as we work from home and social distance, are kids more influenced by our comments and actions, even if they're not directed toward them? So yeah, just thinking about we're spending more time with our kids. So.
Yeah, I think very similar to what I said. I think kids absorb so much regardless. So even not being home all day. So I think that added layer of contact, especially like all around the clock, especially when parents are fatigued and exhausted. It can be so hard to put on a brave face or put on those positive comments for kids. But it's important to, bring in some of those healthy behaviors and model them, to, instead of focusing on like what's wrong, focusing on like what we can do better, or what or even just focusing on things not related to the body. So focusing on like how, hard like you're working or your kids are working, they're doing well in school, focusing on values and characteristics that don't necessarily align with body stuff, I think is really important, because if all of our comments are on like how good we look and things like that, our worth becomes tied to our body image. And that's not necessarily good, because bodies change so frequently all the time.
That's so true. Thank you. All right. So moving into like, what about adults? I've heard people talking about like gaining the COVID-19 during quarantine and social distancing. So is it common for people to gain or lose weight during times of crisis like this? And what can people do to mitigate the negative effects, both physically and psychologically?
So I think this question really reflects how much like disordered eating and body image impacts our lives, because we're going through like a national pandemic right now. Like there's people's like lives are being uprooted, but people are worried about gaining weight. And that, on the surface, it's like there's so many things to worry about. That shouldn't be the thing that we focus on. But I think it sheds light on how stressful this can be. And our bodies really reflect that stress. We want to control our environment, but we can't control our environment. So we're trying to control our bodies. And I think that weight gain, weight loss, both can happen because people respond to stress in different ways. Some people overeat, some people undereat, some people are snacking. Again, that stress is very high, so you're not as active outdoors. So it would make sense that bodies will fluctuate during this time.
So, and then if you notice that fluctuation that's bothering you, like what is a better mindset maybe, or what are some things you could maybe tell yourself so that you know?
Yeah, I'm a huge advocate in like radical self-compassion. I think being hard on ourselves, especially during difficult times, is just not the road. I think that if you are exhausted and you can barely get out of the couch, forcing yourself to, run a mile outside isn't reasonable. But I think trying to set those goals of like taking a walk, eating something good, making it feel like self-care. Like I'm going to cook myself a good meal for my kids and me, or we're going to have fun together. We're going to go on a walk. We're going to see nature, making it feel like not this goal that you're not meeting, but rather a part of your life that feels good for you.
Yeah, that's great. And there's so many fun ways to like take a fun walk with your kids. Like I know I've done like a rainbow color scavenger hunt with my son, looking for birds. Like,
walk.
Wonderful. Yeah. Just to get out and see your neighbors maybe and wave. So
yeah, absolutely. Especially getting that sunshine is really important.
Yes, it makes a big difference. I'm glad we have a sunny week this week. So let's see. So this might also relate back to the previous question, but many parents are used to being able to go to the gym, yoga studio, or just to work out alone or with friends. Gyms have been closed, so it's been difficult to stick with your normal routine. And with children at home, parents often can't maintain an exercise routine. So do you have any, I guess taking walks is
Yeah. I think again, having that moment of reflection where it's like my schedule has changed, my life has changed. This is going to have to change too, and this is temporary, and it's okay if you're not going to the gym every day, but just telling yourself that what you're doing is enough. And there are really creative ways to exercise. There's so many people who are doing like Zumba, things like that, that people can seek out if they want to. But I also think it's important to realize that like you don't need to come out of the pandemic with six-pack abs, especially if you're a parent. Your job is to keep your kid alive. Keep the hope, keep the faith.
Right. Yeah, I've been grateful. On the YWCA mailing list, they send a virtual workout like every Monday through Friday. So nice to have, and I've never done it, but I'm really grateful it's there. But the time. But there are lots of resources. And I think the Central Library has a weekly yoga meeting on Zoom, so you can go to the library's website and do that.
And in a way, people who are nervous to go in person to kinds of classes and stuff like that, this might be a nice way of taking that pressure off.
Yeah, try something new.
And they have stuff for all kinds of body sizes too. It's not just, super and crazy intense fitness classes. There are a lot of different options for people.
That's great. Okay, so yes, if there's the next question, many of us are working from home. We're not necessarily getting into our work clothes every day. We might not even be brushing our hair or even thinking about that. But what kind of psychological effect might that have on people? Like, is it, I don't know, like if it's better to get dressed and in work mode versus just, I don't know.
Yeah. So I feel like it's complicated because I want to say, like, yes, it's important to have a routine. It's important to get dressed, but I think it's also important to recognize if you can't brush your hair, if you're not being able to get out of the couch, that's because of something. You're going through something really hard right now if that's what you're experiencing. And I think it can be hard to feel like our emotions are valid because we are kept inside and we're not necessarily seeing, we're not if we're not in the hospitals, if we're not around like these big disruptions, it's hard to know that it's like this weird feeling of like, I know it's crazy out there, but it doesn't feel like it is. So it's like this weird cognitive process, but I think it's important to validate that this is a really difficult time and people respond in very different ways. And especially comparing yourself to someone who, is maybe doing everything that they need to do right now. But again, I think people overextend themselves. Some people underextend themselves, but I do think having a routine is really important. I know for me that I even if I don't put on professional clothes, I switch out my pajamas into like lounge clothes. I try to put in some kinds of things in my day that make it feel different. I make sure to open up the windows, having those changes in the day to show that like, okay, I'm out of sleep mode, I'm in work mode, I'm in hangout mode. So you don't just feel like Groundhog Day, like everything is the same thing over and over.
That makes a lot of sense. That's good. Okay. And I think the last question we have, unless somebody else wants to add a question to the conversation, you're welcome to do that. But our last question that we have written down is for people who are already at risk of poor body image and self-acceptance, what can they do to lessen the risk of getting depressed or anxious during this time?
Yeah, I think it's a really good question because it can be really difficult during this time if you already have an existing eating disorder, body image issues. You are being forced to sit with your body more than usual and have maybe your thoughts going on. If you don't have access to what you used to, you might get more meticulous about what you're eating. I think putting up boundaries, especially in regards to social media, so making sure that you're not consuming things that make you feel worse about yourself. Like there was the whole gaining quarantine 15, but those kinds of jokes can kind of really internalize people's like experiences. And so separating all of that from yourself and making sure you disengage for your well-being, I think is important, as well as like intentionally doing work that makes you feel good about yourself, intentionally doing whether it's like mindful exercises, mindful stretching, or even if you're journaling, just how much you appreciate your body, just taking that time because you're going to need it.
Yeah. This wasn't an official question, but yeah. So do you mind answering, like, what are your thoughts on like memes and stuff that are spread, like COVID-19, or just memes that are joking or something during this time?
I personally, I don't have any space for it. I think on the surface it's funny and it's humorous, but I think that it's reflective of something much deeper. As I've mentioned, we're going through such a stressful experience in our time in history for multiple reasons, not just the pandemic. And I think it's interesting how weight becomes this thing that people can joke about and worry about. And sometimes it's a coping mechanism, but ultimately I think that it does more harm than good. Because people who have eating disorders, people who have been stigmatized about their weight, see those messages, and it doesn't always feel good for them to see that.
No. Let's see, I'm going to make sure that there weren't any other questions. And I think we're good. So is there anything else you'd like to add about your research or anything?
I would say that if people have worries and questions, there's a lot of material online. And I think that Google can be your best friend in regards to, you know, like, how do I get through a funk? How do I get a better routine going? How do I talk to my kids about food? There's a lot of good information out there. And so if you feel hopeless or helpless, you know, you can access. And again, nobody can be perfect. I think, you know, we're all just doing our best right now.
Right. Thank you so much. And is the Body Image and Disordered Eating Laboratory webpage, is that a place people can go to for resources, or is that more?
Yeah, absolutely. People can go to the website and there's some resources there. I think me trying to see, I'm doing videos on Payne County Youth Services because I'm a therapist there. So I'm doing regular YouTube videos about body image. And so you can find it on PCYS on Facebook.
Okay, great. Thank you. That's a fantastic resource. All right. So I think we're going to wrap up our conversation. Join us next Tuesday at 10 a.m. This will be our last coronavirus Q&A. And I think we're going to be joined by Professor Michael Morris, who works with OSU Tulsa's Department of Economics. So we're going to be talking about, just economics during this time, especially family budgets and as economics affects your family. So feel free to ask questions ahead of time. We've got a Facebook event page. You can add questions there if you have anything you'd like Professor Morris to address, or you can email me at Tara, Tara.Rittler, Rittler @gmail.com, and I'll make sure we get those added to the discussion. So thank you so much, Becca, for joining us this week.
Thank you for having me. I really enjoyed this.
Thank you.